Welcome to the December 20th, 2022 Education and Pupil Services Committee in-person and virtual meeting. The meeting of the Education and Pupil Services Committee will please come to order. The district posted this evening's agenda to board docs at least 24 hours prior to the commencement of this meeting. Is there a motion to approve that previously posted agenda?
Second.
Thank you. Are there any amendments to offer?
Board President Brown, we had to add a slide related to attendance and staffing. The original slide had two parts that were one was embedded, and when you clicked on it to the public, it didn't initiate. So we just took that image and made it a second slide. It's not a substantial change. It's just making sure they have access to that information.
Okay, so we'll say yes to that, and will anyone move to add the described item to the agenda?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The agenda with the approved amendments, has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please signify by saying I oppose and state your name for the record. Those abstaining, please signify by saying I abstain and state your name for the record. The motion carried. I will now turn over the Education and Pupil Services Committee to Co-Chair Director Neal.
Thank you, President Brown. Dr. Kelly, could you please begin with an overview of the agenda items tonight, and then you can start agenda item number 1.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Tonight we have two items on the agenda. The first item is informational, and we will use that time to review the annual, we'll review the state assessment data like we do each year. So that item is informational. The second item is the Keystone exams winter administration window. I'll review some key points as we are approaching testing season. That item is also informational for this evening. So we're going to begin with our first presentation, which is the annual review of the state assessment data. And around this time each year, we dedicate a committee meeting to review the state assessment data with the board and the public. And tonight I'm joined with Dr. Council and three of our curriculum supervisors, Mr. Schwartz, Ms. O'Neill, and Ms. Kathy Kenya for this presentation. Before I begin with the agenda, I want to share with the board and the public that the reporting of this data, as well as our own analysis, has been impacted by COVID-19 over the past few years. And in the next few slides, you will see the complexity of this analysis and the number of variables that are factors in our data review. Tonight, our presentation will include the following: an overview of the district trends with a focus on our student population and the impact staffing has had and continues to have on our district data. The supervisors will provide an analysis of the standards in the tested subject areas of math, ELA, and science. And we will also review the plans we have implemented to support the standards and share a few resources with the board and the public to review. The data presentation tonight was taken from multiple data sources that the school district has available to them. The information on this slide was extracted from something called eMetric, which allows the district to access data and reports from the PA state assessments, such as PSSAs, Keystones, and access tests. The next two slides show a cohort comparison, which is just one report that is able to be pulled from eMetric. I want to walk you through the transiency nature of our student population. So on this slide, you will see in 2019, we had 881 third grade students tested. In 2020, we did not test anyone due to COVID. In 2021, then, it was a testing optional year where we had 400 of the original 881 students take the test. And then in 2022, last year, we had, out of that original 881, 537 students assessed as sixth grade students. So you'll see the transiency of that nature and how that 881 with the students that stayed in the district for us in 2022 as sixth graders were 537 students that remained with us. As I mentioned before, the impact COVID-19 had on participation and achievement are demonstrated in that example right there. A similar example comes with this next slide, and our transient nature with our seventh grade students. So again, starting as fourth grade students in 2019, there were 975 students. 2020, again, no students were tested because of COVID-19. In 2021, we had that optional testing year, which 328 students of that 975 took the test. And then in 2022, 612 of that original 975 cohort, or that group of students, were tested as seventh grade students. Again, the impact from COVID-19 had on participation and achievement are demonstrated in that example.
And Dr. Kelly, it's also important to note that in 2022, the 612 students you're referring to we can only match 612 from the original 975, but we still tested in 2022 over 800 students in that year. So there's, in each of these slides, hundreds of new students that were not with us in earlier years coming into the school district.
Right. So, and each year we test about 1,000 students per grade level. So you'll see in fourth grade that 975 is pretty accurate to what we test every single year that we are testing. So that transiency in nature, when we're still testing that 975, there's a lot of movement there. I want to share another example of how the increased enrollment and the changing needs of our student further complicates our analysis. At our October Education and Pupil Services Committee meeting, we presented a new elementary program to support our EL students. This increase in beginner EL students is a trend throughout the school district in grades K through 12, as indicated on the numbers that you see here. Both the transiency of our schools and the increased supports of our students and their needs are impacting our analysis of the data, the teaching, the instruction, and the professional development we continue to have to provide to our teachers and our students. At this time, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Dr. Council, who very rarely joins me up here, to show how staffing is also impacting the data.
Sure. And based on, thanks so much, Dr. Kelly. Based on what Dr. Kelly has already shared and what you already know, we know that our district is faced with many challenges, or have been faced with many challenges over the past few years. One of those challenges that we face due to the pandemic is chronic absenteeism. And if you take a look at the slide above, chronic absenteeism is defined as missing 10% or more of school days. So what the new federal data, what the new data show is that chronic absenteeism continues to rise among teachers in public schools nationally. This slide shows that more than 70% of the schools that surveyed, if you can see that first light blue line from the top, that 70% of schools surveyed had more absenteeism for teachers since the pandemic started. The blue line above it tells us that in 2021 through 2022 alone, 49% of schools had higher chronic teacher absences compared to the prior year. Our next slide highlights that schools serving high concentrations of students of color are particularly likely to see teachers miss more than 10% of school days in 21 through the 22 school year. That data shows that schools surveyed with greater than 75%, so they actually break it down, less than 25%, 25 to 50%, 75% to 100% of students of color. But in that chart, it says that the schools surveyed that had greater than 75% of students of color, out of that, 55% of those schools have seen an increase in chronic absenteeism as compared to the previous school year. That represents 21%. If we had the slide up there, you would see it represents a 21% increase compared to the schools with less than 25% students of color. So that chart did an excellent job of comparing different schools, those with 75% or more students of color and those with 25% or less. And we continue to see that schools serving high concentrations of students of color are more likely to see teachers miss more than 10% of school days. Overall, chronic absenteeism among teachers continued to rise last year. compared to both before the pandemic and the year prior, according to data from the National Center of Educational Statistics. We see that in mostly already what we consider short-staffed schools, similar to our school district, teacher absenteeism has created yet another challenge for us that is now being studied and brought to the forefront. So again, there has not been a lot of conversation regarding chronic absenteeism, but it's our job, obviously, to bring it to your attention and share with you what we're doing to confront this issue. What I found also in the data, similar to what is happening here in our district, is that 3 out of 4 public schools now frequently pull other teachers or non-teachers, non-teaching staff to cover classes either during their prep, or they're relying on these teachers to cover during their prep. Again, this is a national problem. This can pull. What we also know is that when teachers have to cover, when they have to cover classes or utilize their prep time, that we know that this can pull down the climate of the school, as well as their connection with students. So chronic absenteeism have been connected to more than just outbreaks, pandemic outbreaks or illness. We can also connect that absenteeism to family difficulties and financial difficulties that our employees or our teachers are experiencing as well. So here in our district, we're seeing trends that's similar to what the data is showing. The data from last year, 2021 through 2022, shows that at our high school alone, and Dr. Mieri brought this out in another meeting outside the district, that at our high school alone, we've had over 8,000 instances of instruction disrupted by absences. And I just want, to kind of like let that sink in, that again, over 8,000 instances of instruction disrupted by absences here in the district. I will share more current data next month during our staffing update. So as we look at this slide, we see that there's a lot that we have to look forward to, I guess, in the future, a lot of things that we have to overcome. A number of challenges, as you can see there on the screen, with probably one of the highest ones or one of the biggest challenges, again, is our staffing shortage. We will continue to experience shortages, or it's expected that these shortages will continue in what we consider hard to fill positions. Dr. Kelly already mentioned the issue around transiency. Also on the screen, the COVID challenges. We still are seeing positive cases and have to deal with that in our schools. We will continue to address the academic regression, at the same time being fiscally responsible as we deal with, as we operate within our budget. So I just want to share that again. Next month, I'll bring forth a staffing update where we will be able to provide some additional details, as well as discuss what we've done out of the Office of Human Resources to overcome some of these challenges that we are experiencing, and with some recommendations for the future.
So at this time, the curriculum supervisors will be joining me. I'm going to kick out Dr. Council.
Oh, that was
Sorry. And we're going to discuss some of the trends in the standards and highlight some of the areas of strength, and then look to discuss some of the areas where we need to provide some more focus. I'm going to turn over the presentation first to Mr. Schwartz, who is going to begin with a discussion of our math trends that we see.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Dr. Kelly. So, an analysis of the 2022 PSSA math data showed that the standards listed on the slide here were strengths in grades 3 through 8. Note that all but one of the standards are in bold. Bold standards are considered major standards of the grade level, with a recommendation that 65 to 85% of class time per year should focus on these standards. The design of the PSSA follows these recommendations when delineating points in the number of questions to certain topics. The next slide lists the areas for growth in grades 3 through 5 of the standards listed. Only the numbers and operations standards are considered major standards. And while all mathematical learning is important, the major standards should be our most immediate focus and concern. Any new learning in subsequent grade levels are dependent upon skills and strategies within these standards. Of the areas for growth at the middle school level, you'll notice the ratios, rates, and proportionality standards and expressions and equation standards are bolded, again indicating that they are major standards of the grade level. The clusters of standards related to ratios, rates, and proportionalities are especially significant as they underpin much of the future work in 8th grade and Algebra 1. On the Algebra 1 Keystone exam, our greatest strength was in the field of coordinate geometry, which primarily focuses on describing and using the graph of a line on a coordinate plane. This is the culmination of work that begins in grade 7, where students learn to understand slope of a line as the beginning of rate of change. The greatest area for growth and improvement was in solving linear equations algebraically. Any deficit in this area underscores the importance of providing students enough opportunities to grapple with visual representations of mathematics before attending to the abstract equations, just kind of, just 3x plus 2y. My final slide, please. Thank you. My final slide's a non-exhaustive list. I won't go through, the whole read it. It's a non-exhaustive list of the various efforts being made to address the areas for growth and further advance our strengths. Many of the activities, such as any content-specific professional development, alignment of Tier 2 supports to high-leverage skills, and the utilization of supportive software address specific skill deficits, while others, including program implementation training, our partnership with Making Math Matter, effective formative assessment practices, they all seek to inform and improve general math instructional pedagogy, hoping to raise our floor for everyone in all areas.
We are going to shift our focus to ELA, and you are going to see on the next two slides that we are looking at grades 3 through 8. It's important to note here that our teachers do a really thorough job with vocabulary instruction, which is content-specific, story-specific, and generative vocabulary. That's important because these are critical to developing strong comprehenders, and especially in light of our ever-rising EL population, vocabulary and building background are critical so that they can understand what they're reading. These are our areas for growth, and you want to note that both of these areas require a tremendous amount of high-level thinking on the part of our students. They are challenged to manipulate text and formulate responses, and when it comes to the text-dependent analysis part, they need to then take that response and formulate a 5-paragraph essay that does require the content to be correct, the syntax to be correct, and the conventions of English to be correct. So it's definitely a challenge. We're asking little people to do very challenging work. I'm going to pass it over to Kathy to talk about the high school.
The slide that you're looking at now represents our Keystone Literature exam. All 10th grade students at Upper Darby High School are encouraged to take the Keystone exam. It has 2 modules. Module 1 is fiction literature, and Module 2 is nonfiction literature. Our strengths are in line with the rest of the state of Pennsylvania. We are pleased that deliberate professional development and teaching students how to analyze nonfiction text in all subject areas is beginning to pay dividends, as seen in the scores. This shows our areas for growth. After I said that analyzing and interpreting fiction literature is a strength, it seems counterintuitive to say that reading fiction for meaning is a weakness based on the anchor descriptors here. A broader perspective reveals that 1 or 2 word descriptors do not do justice to the depth of knowledge that the state expects our students to demonstrate on the test. I'm going to give you an example of a question. Students are asked to analyze how an example from the text supports the author's purpose. In order to answer it, they must be able to infer the author's purpose. Another example, students are asked how the author uses techniques of fiction to effectively communicate an idea. The list of techniques of fiction is pretty long and complicated for students to interpret. So this is an area for growth that we are working on right now.
So what are we doing about this? Well, I think it's important to note that although the data is starting in grade 3 that you're looking at, the real work begins with our kindergarten students. And and our superintendent has made it a part of our district goals that we are really emphasizing that K-2 programming and really building those foundational skills. So when we're looking at our action steps, we're really looking at supporting teachers in kindergarten through 12th grade. Just to highlight a few of the things that we're doing, and we really are trying to approach this in multiple ways. We have our formal professional development, which is really building teacher content knowledge. We have several data meetings throughout the year where we're really analyzing those particular strands. And then we have teachers setting individual student and class goals and setting action steps to reach those goals. We have targeted learning walks where we are going into classrooms and really differentiating our feedback for teachers, which is really important when you think about all the staffing that Dr. Council talked about, because we have teachers that are brand new teachers, and we also have teachers who have been with us for a very long time, and they require very different levels of support to get them where we want them to be with the students. And then we have all of the administrators that we're working with at the building level, especially this year, lots of new administrators, and we want to make sure that we are all on the same page, supporting teachers and students at the building level.
Just as a reminder, because you and I have this debate, as I've had a debate with
Do I win?
Ms. Kenya, I guess if you want to keep your own score, and Board President Brown had asked me to, excuse me, as a reminder, Foundations, you believe, is a key program here in the school, and I see Desiree shaking your head. So just to be clear, this board blessed us with supporting the implementation of that program recently. And so the fruits of that hard work, kindergarten, first and second grade, are starting to happen. And this is the idea of how we learn how to walk, before you run, and you crawl before you walk, and then before you run. Conceptually, students need to understand, and this is a big part of the school district. I want to make sure we're clear on this. This information we're providing tonight is a review of the standards, because the scores throughout the state and the country have declined tremendously. As you presented earlier, students not attending school, opting out of testing, there's inconsistent data, and the state said don't rely on the scores. Rely on where you're seeing some standards gaps to fill in where that work is. I know we have hundreds of kids in after-school tutoring, extended school year opportunities, but you believe, based on the goal that I want to see happen, that from kindergarten through second grade, where we know we make our future, that the Foundations program, if you can just highlight that, is a key to helping students break down the code of reading.
So there is a tremendous amount of research around the science of reading, and I would love nothing more than to share it with everyone. However, what they're saying is there have been multiple approaches to teaching reading over the last however many years. If you even think back to when you learned how to read with like the red group, the blue group, that doesn't exist anymore. And with the ever-changing things that are happening, we are also forced to sort of retrain our teachers too, who may have learned even at the college level how to teach reading in a totally different way. But explicit phonics instruction, and Dr. McGarry and I do go back and forth on this, because I think what he needs to understand about me is that it is not about foundations as much as it's about teaching children explicit phonics instruction. We as a district, we as a district chose Foundations as the vehicle to get us there because it's research based and it's effective, and we looked at the numbers in all of the other districts that are using it, and they did tell me it's going to take 1 to 3 years to really see results, which I'm extremely impatient, but that's the reality of that. So explicit phonics instruction means that we are teaching phonics skills to mastery. In other programs, you will see that they teach it for 4 weeks and move on regardless. But in Foundations, we don't move on until 80% of the students have reached that mastery level. So we are getting ourselves into a situation where we're not creating further gaps. And with other programs, you see that children become compensators. So we taught them to check for picture clues and to look at the words around them to figure out what it meant. And by doing those things, we actually created some barriers because we want them using the strategies that we're teaching them to be able to decode those words. In addition to the explicit phonics instruction, however, is this other piece that we missed, We didn't miss it, but we've done a much better job of it over the last, I'm going to say, about year. In addition to explicit phonics instruction, students need to have time built into their curriculum to talk about, to transfer the skills that they're learning into decodable and accountable text. And there's a difference between choosing a level text versus choosing something that they're reading for fun versus choosing a grade level text. There's like a million different texts they can choose. We are really, really emphasizing right now the decodable accountable practice, because that, in conjunction with the explicit phonics instruction, is what is going to set the district on fire. And next year at this time, we are going to have numbers, and Dr. McGarry is going to be like, I knew you could do it. That's what I'm waiting for. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, sometimes when we get excited as educators, we also talk in code about decoding. And so I just want to simplify this and say that in our school district, as we all know, and the board knows this, but for the public, we've always had about a 3 to 4 week gap because the school year is 180 days, 183 if it doesn't snow. That's an inside joke. But if it's sunny, we go to school longer than if it snows, we go shorter. And which is a problem. I don't like that. The reality is we get our kids to a place in our elementary schools, kindergarten, first and second grade, to almost being where they need to be by that grade level. And then the summer hits, and we spend the first 3 weeks of school trying to catch it back up, ramping it back up. And what you're seeing in tonight's standards are on certain tests, there could be a question in third grade that's 3 questions. And a kid could get 1 out of 3, and it doesn't hurt them in the third grade. Well, that same subject matter goes up to 7 questions in 5th grade. And if they could not read the paragraph, and it literally could be in one paragraph, one multisyllabic word, right, like Mount Vesuvius, and then the background knowledge of what Mount Vesuvius is, if they can't decode that word and don't have the background knowledge of what that word is, the paragraph becomes something they can't comprehend. And then as a result, they can't take that and translate that to answering questions. For years, schools have moved away from skills training. Here's this letter, here's the sound it makes. When you combine that letter or that vowel together, which is blending, how do you make a word? Nonsense words list, letter fluency. There was a period of time where that was important. Then we moved away to whole language, which was an approach where it was, I use this approach, I say it was much more of a lovey-dovey way of wanting kids to learn to read, versus there's a skill in drilling to learn how to read these sounds. We're getting back to making that happen. So the debate that goes on is that not everybody's a reading teacher. That's the other problem. So when someone comes out of school to be a first grade teacher, it doesn't mean they were really taught how to be a reading teacher. And so a program is one thing, foundations. We've layered into here is the AIM School in Manayunk, which is also training as many of our teachers as we can to understand first grade reading and second grade reading, where 15 years ago, 10 years ago, we relied on a reading specialist because we had so few kids who needed reading. Now we're putting much more pressure on a first and second grade teacher because there are fewer people certified in reading. So simply put, kindergarten students are coming in and they don't know the letters of the alphabet. Let's say 25% of them know the letters of the alphabet to say them. Then they're behind in the sounds that they make. And so that is essentially what we're having to reteach first, second grade. And now add to the fact that some of these kids, some of the parents kept their kids out of kindergarten during COVID because it was a virtual kindergarten. So they missed kindergarten, and some of them may have missed first and second grade. And now we're trying to catch up on that skill, not just I mean public education, not just Upper Darby. And this program is going to help build those foundational skills, but it's going to take time.
At this point, we're going to transfer from Kristen's reading over here that she loves to talk about to science. So Mrs. Riches was not able to join us tonight, so I'm going to present our findings in science. Analyzing science is a little bit difficult because of how the test is structured. So students only take the science test in 4th grade and in 8th grade. So there are many gaps, and those standards keep layering on top of each other. So you will see in 4th grade and 8th grade, we have some similar strengths, and it's very important to keep that spiraling of curriculum occurring here so that those standards continue to be addressed. So that's what you see in 4th grade with the life cycle that is taught both in 2nd grade, 3rd grade, but then assessed actually in 4th grade. And then you see something similar in 8th grade when we're talking about weather, in that the standard is assessed in 8th grade. However, weather is connected throughout many of our experiences. So that tends to be a strength for 8th grade students. Areas for growth really comes down to the problem-solving process for both 4th and 8th grade students. Again, they're the only two assessed grade levels for science. That's where the PSSA is. And this is definitely one of those areas that are being stressed in the new science standards that are now being adopted for this school year. Not to be implemented right now, but to start the planning process of implementing new standards. So Pennsylvania just recently adopted them a few months ago, and now we will start to shift to these new standards. Unlike math, they're giving ELA back in 2014. They're giving us time to implement these standards and get them set, and then set the assessment to be given in 2025. That's the tentative timeline right now for the state to change the assessment. They're also thinking about changing the grade level in which the student is assessed, maybe to a 5th grade assessment rather than 4th grade. For biology, this is an area of strength. The biology exam are for students that are enrolled in biology as 9th or 10th grade students. It is a requirement that that a student in high school takes the biology exam at some point before their 11th grade year, where you start to capture those accountability pieces. Which I'll talk about in a second when I talk about the Keystone exams. But this exam has 2 modules, and the strength comes in Module 1 and Module 2 when we're talking about the cell structure and cell process, as well as the continuity of life. Our area for growth in biology also is a little bit trickier because of where we assess. So we assess in 4th grade, we assess in 8th grade, and then we assess in 9th or 10th grade. This is one of the strands that is the broadest strand that is tested in environmental and ecology. And this strand is one of the 8 new content divisions in the new standards. So they divide up the standards differently in this new release of the science standards. And will allow us now to have some time to adjust our curriculum to address one of these big content divisions. They also, in the new standards, talk about the science and engineering practices very similar to those 8 mathematical practices that they adopted in 2014 with math standards. So very, very similar in their adoption of how the standards look, but giving us more time to actually address them and make some revisions to our curriculum. Lastly, I know that we presented a lot of information tonight, and it's going to take some time to digest. So a few sites that parents and the board, the public can access are here. Available to everyone. We also have the Upper Darby YouTube parent videos that help to support the student or the parents at home as we're talking about early literacy skills and early math skills. That is always available through our YouTube channel. So I want to thank you tonight for your attention, and I want to see if there's any questions at this point, because I do know that there is a lot of information.
First, thank you so much for your presentation. It was very thorough, as always. My question is about the math section. I know you mentioned in math that one of the things you wanted to do here for the math action steps was for to utilize IXL to target individual areas of growth. So my question about IXL, I know you do use it already, but what is the time, like the goal you have for each of the grade levels for the weekly usage to try to already prevent some of the. Yeah.
IXL from their research, they have something what they consider the IXL effect, and the IXL effect includes, 15 minutes per day or 60 minutes total per week for a student to get the full maximum benefit out of the program. Anything less than that, you may not be taking advantage. Anything more, as we know with anything with kids, the more they do things, it has kind of diminishing returns when they use it too much. Our hope for IXL though is, it is, no more or less than distributive practice. It is not a substitution for instruction. So the one thing we've made clear with our teachers is, IXL, the student should not be using IXL during our 60 minutes of core instruction. It is practice. It is a tool. Thank you. Sorry. It is a tool for, and Dr. Haig, you and I have spoke about this before. It is a tool for practice so that, you're not burning worksheets, and it can be, tiered for kids depending on the level. And it does, excellent help in that way, so you're not getting everyone the same worksheet and the same sort of questions. But our real gains will not necessarily come from IXL. Our gains will come from instruction, and where IXL helps is in diagnosing some of the deficits, for assigning skills specific to some of those deficits in our MTSS period. And that it aligns to NWA MAP as well. So when we input all those scores through Bob Polinsky and through that system, we send all our IXL skills, so it gives students a list of which skills they should be working on.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Yep, just a quick question and then a comment. Can you tell me more about the YouTube videos? Does it cover the standards? I'm hoping that it doesn't go in this level of detail that would probably scare the parents away. But, what kind of aid does it provide? If you can just give me a better feel for how it helps the parents.
So what we do is every week we push out math and ELA videos. For ELA, I rotate between the early literacy skills and then skills that would benefit parents who are trying to help their students with reading and comprehension. So knowing that we have targeted informational text right now, the upcoming videos are about the kinds of questioning and things that you could do. A lot of what I see parents need, and I am a parent too, so I see this with my own kids, is that it's hard to get kids to want to read at home. And finding something that they are interested in, especially something that's nonfiction, well, sometimes it's more interesting, but can be a challenge. So our first set of videos that you'll see have to do with resources that are available on ClassLink that the district provides that parents may not even realize they have access to, like Epic and different online tools where they can search for things of interest. So our next one that's coming up is going to be outside Sellers Library, because we want parents to realize that there's lots of different things in the community that they could do to get these free resources that they have for kids. So we are slowly, this year I was pretty intentional about it. We're slowly building in, this is where the resources are. And then once we get them in your hands, this is the kind of thing that you can do with them to help reinforce what we're doing here at school. For the early literacy piece, it's a lot about the sounds, making sure that the parents know the sounds and they can support their kids, even if it's just watching me do it, because sometimes it could be challenging for our parents at home. And then what the kids, I'll say in my videos, this is what we do at school, so you can see how we teach it. And then this is what you can do at home if you want to help us practice it. So it's kind of like a twofold there. So I have both going on. Rob's the superstar too, though.
I'm getting better every week at them, though. I like them every week. The math videos are specific to content, all around the idea that, the question I hear most, both, in this job and honestly in my own life is, I didn't learn it that way. So I take that as an opportunity to, to educate. So there's one on there about using a number line for, adding within 10, to understanding how to compare fractions, to, other ways to understand multiplication as it was 3 times 4, the same as 4 times 3. So I'm really just kind of picking off, what I hear, the questions that I hear most often in some high leverage areas, so that if people have questions again about, I didn't learn it that way, it's my opportunity to do that and provide it in a visual way.
Thank you. That was very informative. Do you guys use Jason to produce your videos? No. Huh? You just post them? Wow, you doing this? Wow.
The
I'm,
lighting,
I'm
the lighting
really
online- the
impressed.
lighting
I'm really
online could be
impressed
better,
now.
I'm not gonna lie.
So this is birthed out of the idea that I have been on Dr. Kelly, that I want, of the first video I wanted as I want our own kind of Khan Academy for parents to go to help practicing homework and working with kids, that if we don't feel comfortable ourselves, that they can go to, like, here's the stuff that we're talking about, you can pull it up and you can work with your child on it. It was really came out of one particular conversation that I was really worried about, is teaching blending and how to read. And so making sure that our parents know the appropriate sounds and how to say letters and to make those blends happen is what the first video, and we found some of our teachers didn't know how to make appropriate blends. So I asked to create this video montage, starting really with how to teach the sounds of the letters and blending, and they've turned it into their own educational YouTube for parents for homework.
Thank you for adding that. Very impressive. And my last thing is just a comment, just really a kudos. It's clear you have all the right people in place, the right team. Everybody is so infectious about what they're teaching. Everybody is a subject matter expert, and we're lucky to have you all. So thank you for your work.
Just real quick, I'm just so thrilled to see the focus on early literacy that we have put in place, the foundations. It's going to be a major game changer for every child, not just regular ed students, but special ed students as well will benefit immensely. I'm so excited to see this report next December.
Thank you, Director Mitchell. Anyone else?
No pressure.
All right, thank you for the presentation. Dr. Kelly, would you like to move on to agenda item number 2?
So this next presentation is just an overview of our Pennsylvania Keystone exams. So as I just mentioned with the results that we had in the standards, this is how we get there. So beginning, believe it or not, in September, we start planning for this first administration of the Keystone exams, which is Wave 2, or the winter assessment. So this high school team does a tremendous job in starting in September by ordering books. We order over 1,000 books in each tested subject area: math, ELA, and science or biology. And that's where this process begins. So the Keystone exams is now a graduation requirement beginning with this class. So that is nothing new. We've talked about it over and over again. Mrs. Simone has been up here numerous times talking about Act 158 and how it is starting with the class of 2023. When we first presented it, class of 2023 sounded very far away, and now it's right in front of us. So we are gearing up for now this next administration. Remember, that is not just one pathway that students can take to reach this Act 158 or to demonstrate proficiency, that there are alternate pathways, but this is just one pathway that the students are proficient in one or more of the Keystone exams. Also, the Keystone exams, like I mentioned before, have an accountability issue or accountability tied to it as well. So by 11th grade, students need to take the assessment in math or Algebra 1, biology, and literature. So as soon as we get back from break, the 4th, that Wednesday, we start with our Algebra 1 exams. So they will take the exams, our students, probably about 1,000 of them will take the Algebra 1 exam on January 4th and 5th, followed by literature, and then followed by biology. So we have 6 days of testing, abbreviated schedules. We have been communicating this since early December with our end of November really, with our parents, that the assessment was going to be starting and that schedules are going to be changing. And these are the testing windows or the testing dates that we have.
I just want to add, the reason why it's even more complicated in Upper Darby is because we have so many more students that have to test and take it in a block schedule in comparison to other schools who might not be a block who have the full year, and it's set differently where they can take it and they have smaller numbers and less worry. Remember, in Pennsylvania, which we didn't discuss tonight, if you're reading the inquiry and you're reading around other school communities, Act 158, the graduation requirement in Pennsylvania, is still tethered in some ways to Module 1 and Module 2 of Keystone exams. It's still part of the pathway. So what's complicated in Upper Darby is we have to try to test in just about as many windows as we can sooner with students because there are so many students that have to have the opportunity to make up certain modules to make that pathway a reality if that's the pathway they want to use for graduation. It's another complicated aspect of a larger urban school district.
And just some general testing information for parents and guardians as we begin this testing window. The Pennsylvania Department of Education prohibits electronic devices, so our teachers and our proctors are responsible for collecting all cell phones, smartwatches, and anything like that. They cannot be. They have to be turned off. We have a great system for doing all of this, but it is again another piece of just how complicated it is when we get to this testing wave and this window. If a cell phone is found or an electronic device is found, then we do have to go through some proper procedures with the state, as well as our school policies that we have, or procedures that we have to follow at that point. The other piece to review here is if a parent does not want their student to take the assessment because of a religious belief. There is a policy, which is policy 127, that we have to adhere to, and that parents are required then to contact the school principal. Again, all of this has been outlined for parents already, but this is just an overview for anybody in the public that is listening that is ready to take the assessment. So they do have to come in, meet with the principal, review the assessment, sign a confidentiality agreement, review the assessment with the proper person at the district, and then request a written permission and exemption from the superintendent, all which gets filed back to the state and filed with at a central level and also at the building level. So there are many different avenues and things that we have to adhere to as we gear up for this first testing window.
And Dr. Kelly, we have to store this for 3 years, correct?
Correct. So each testing window that we have to keep down to seating charts with at the building level, at the district level for these assessments. So it is a lot of organization. It is a lot of, making sure that we have all of the things in place that we need to. And like we said in our first presentation and this presentation, we are testing a lot of children on top of it. So about 1,000 each testing window in the elementary schools or the PSSA, and then here we're doing it twice because there is a spring window as well as this winter window. So it's a lot of testing, a lot of organization. So that's it for the Keystone administration. Are there any questions at this point?
Thank you very much. It's not so much a question as it is a comment. Testing, that was a great presentation, but having to test all these different standards, and I know this is something that we've brought up before, in spite of the fact that the district and all of our teachers and our administrators already have ways that we test our students ourselves to these standards and make wise use of the limited time and resources that we have. I hope as we have a new state government being sworn in January, and as they have different constituent groups taking a look at things like how we address public education when they take a look at standardized testing, I hope they do consider all the time and resources that it does take to pull this kind of thing off, and maybe reconsider again, not necessarily making it easier for students to graduate, but making it more realistic for school districts as diverse as ours to be able to meet more students where they're at and teach to their strengths instead of focusing so much on their weaknesses and what a particular overruling state guideline has to say about it. Just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Director Orr Savage. Time is now for public comment. We will first address any in-person public comments. Was there any signed in public comments? Seeing none. Now we will go to any online or phone comments.
Board Member David Neal, there was a message left, but it was error, and there was no message left, and we emailed back twice to that. Other than that, there were no comments that came in via voice message or email, and there obviously are no in-person participants here this evening.
All right, thank you. That concludes public comment. Dr. Kelly, could you please have a review of tonight's agenda?
Absolutely. So the first item was our annual review of the Pennsylvania State Assessment data. That was an informational presentation. And the second item was the Keystone exam winner administration window, which was also informational.
All right, thank you, Dr. Kelly. I hand this meeting back over to President Brown.
Thank you, Director Neal. A motion is in order for the adjournment of the Education and Pupil Services Committee meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Have a good night and have a great holiday, a safe and great holiday, everyone. Thank you. Take care.